What's going on YouTube? Today we are going to be doing one of the biggest pain in the ass jobs on the LS400. We're going to be replacing the starter motor. The starter motor on the 1UZ engine is located underneath the intake manifold. My biggest guess as to why they did that is to have room for the exhaust on the side of the engine. What a stupid goddamn idea, because this turns a simple starter motor job into a hell week. Okay, so we will be removing the intake manifold. There are several while you're in there type repairs that we're going to be doing. One of them is the EGR pipe. This stupid piece of metal is something that often cracks. I think it's because it moves a little bit. This often cracks, leaks, and makes your car sound terrible. Mine is definitely leaking. I have visibly seen a crack, and I can also hear it. We're gonna dive right into it. This is going to take a long time. We have to remove a bunch of stuff, including fuel lines, which is what I am most worried about, because again, there's gonna be gaskets we need to replace, and we're gonna wanna make sure those are nice, tight, and sealed, so I don't burn my shit down. I'm really dreading doing this job. I've been avoiding it for a long time, but the car won't start anymore reliably, so we're going to have to do it. So a little bit about the symptoms. The car is not starting occasionally when I turn the key. Sometimes if I hold the key down, and sometimes when I crank it a bunch of times, it will consistently start. So far it hasn't been able to not start when I go intend to drive it. Many times on the first key turn, nothing happens, and there is a clicking sound. Generally, if nothing happens whatsoever, that often means it's an electrical issue and there's something else going on, because we can hear that clicking and we can hear the starter motor trying to spin, and eventually it does actually spin. I believe that the starter motor is just beginning to fail and the brushes are not making very good contact. I think the brushes probably make contact with some of the starter motor's rotation, so I'm not 100% sure why exactly sometimes it does start, but that's my guess. So another note, I am on a time crunch. I am currently enrolled in school and I work. Doing this job, I'm going to have to make good time on it, so hopefully I can make as thorough of a video as possible, but it'll definitely give you an idea of the scope of this, and I'll try and make it entertaining if I'm not angry. So this diagram gives us an idea of all the things that need to come off. So we have covers, the left and right valve cover covers, I guess, the timing belt covers, all kinds of plastic covers, the throttle body, the intake manifold itself, the lower intake manifold, 1, 2, and then I think 3 fuel lines need to come off. There's multiple fuel lines that will be removed, and then just this water inlet pipe, or water bypass pipe I should say. And I will also mention that on this, according to this, there are several non-reusable parts. There's the EGR gasket, the gaskets that go to the rear water bypass joint, the intake manifold gaskets on various levels, the throttle body gasket. It looks like the fuel line gaskets are not reusable. There's this strange 3-way air hose that is marked as unusable. I don't even know what that is. I guess we'll see where it is and how reusable it is, but yeah. So, let's get started. Okay, so the first several steps are the easiest. The first thing we're going to be doing is removing the battery, removing the air intake ducting, and we will also be draining the coolant. There is a coolant bypass back there that we will need to remove, so unfortunately we're going to have to get rid of some coolant, which is annoying because I just put a bunch of new coolant in. And it's not cheap. So the very first thing I'm going to do is remove the battery, the negative battery terminal. Ow. I've already hit my knuckle. So that's a good start. So we'll go ahead and do that. Honestly, I'm going to do both of them at a time. Whenever you're doing a battery, you need to do the negative first. That's the undumb way to do it. Okay. If you got power tools, they will surely speed up this job and many more. Now, a lot of components are going to be removed in this job. So in this particular case, when I remove something and it has hardware, like so, I am going to tape it to the component that it was removed from. I'm sure a million people already do this, but this is always a good idea to keep track of where stuff goes, because a lot of these bolts are somewhat similar, and it's just a good idea to keep them all together. Not to mention, if something gets knocked around, you don't want the bolt to go flying somewhere under your toolbox and it not go back on the car. Staying organized during this job is going to be really important. Alright, so with the battery disconnected, I'm going to lift it out. Another good habit to try and get into is not to leave your tools scattered all over the engine bay. If you have a cart or anything, or just absolutely anything that you can do to make sure that you're not leaving components scattered around the engine, it's really helpful. Sometimes, especially if the tool is black, it will be very hard to see, and you don't want it dropping in there. You don't want to forget about it and lose it. And it's just a good rule not to use the car as a place to rest your tools. Frankly, we're all going to break that rule from time to time. Alright, so you can kind of remove this intake. It's very simple. It's just held on by a couple of brackets, and then you also have the hose clamps. I try and remove this as one whole thing. It's really not a good idea because it hurts this, but this thing is such a pain in the ass, and mine is actually broken, so I just want to remove it the easiest way possible. Let's go ahead and disconnect it first. But I like to remove things as one whole piece if possible, because I mean, obviously it just makes it easier. Making sure this hose clamp is super loose helps. My duct is already damaged and torn, so it's not going to get much worse. I'm going to have to duct tape it going back on, I think. There is a bolt back here that holds down this air box. Removing this large hose really sucks. Mine is rock hard, so I'm gonna go ahead and start with this smaller hose. I actually can work that clamp off by hand. Hose pliers like this make the job a lot easier, because you can kind of grab around the hose and twist it to break it, and then you can kind of work it off. So these are really great to have. You can get them cheap at Harbor Freight. Probably worth the investment if you work on cars. Okay, pull that one off too, so both of those are removed. This particular hose is the biggest pain in the ass in the world. Again, because mine is rock hard and I had to duct tape it back together at some point. So it's really a joke. So now that that hose is loose and all of this is loose, instead of getting that hose all the way off, I'm going to wrestle it off. Alright. And then if it just pulls straight out, it'll come out of that hose. And the air box is out. In a few preliminary easy steps, we have the battery out, the air ducting is gone, we now have access to removing the throttle body. Alright, next we will be removing the throttle body cables, which is fairly simple, minus this one, which has this clip here that's going to prevent us from removing it until we take off this clip. So let's figure this one out. Alright, so I'm thinking we can just wedge something in here and pop this off. Yeah, it might even be helpful to get two things. I'm just using like two flatheads, and I'm gonna position them on either side of this clip. Oh boy, careful, it's springy. Okay, so yeah, just lift up, and then this plastic piece, actually, can this fit through now? So this plastic piece will then slide out, and we are released. That's actually pretty slick. So essentially what you're going to do is you can pull on this cable to get some more slack, and then this cable will line up with this groove, and then you are able to slide this out. This is actually how quite a lot of throttle cables work. So do that for both of them. One is, I believe, a cruise control, and one is the regular throttle cable. Alright, there's pretty much two ways to drain the coolant. You can remove the lower radiator hose, or you can open that petcock. So we're gonna go ahead and open that, because I'm gonna try and remove as little coolant as possible, because again, I did just put brand new coolant in. Alright, so as you can see with that cracked open, this little hose leaks out a bunch of coolant. It's making a weird noise. And removing the radiator cap would probably speed this process up. While that's draining, this is a good opportunity to go ahead and start removing those timing covers. Now, I will note, I already have some of the covers off. So there's a cover that goes here over the wires for right above the injectors. The spark plug wires have a cover, yada yada. So I don't have any of those on. You will have to remove them, but those are really simple. They're just 10mm bolts. If you can't figure this out, I don't think you should be doing this job. Alright, and now the other side. There's this hose that you're going to have to disconnect to worm your way out of here. And then if you pull straight forward, you don't have to worry about disconnecting it. So once I get the sense that there's not much coolant left up here, I can kind of squeeze. It's just empty. Once I get the sense that a lot of the coolant is not in this upper half of the engine, I close the petcock. I don't want to drain out all of the coolant, so I went ahead and closed it. I probably only drained half of it. Right, next it's asking us to remove this lower cover. There's a couple bolts on there. I think mine might have only been held in by one. Essentially, we can remove these wires, slip it out. Yeah, so I did have to remove that main plug wire. Feeling the intimidation kick in. So next we're gonna go ahead and do these throttle body connectors. These are gonna be brittle. Definitely want to be careful with them. Can't even see what's going on really. Broken. I used a pocket screwdriver to depress the tab, to push the tab in, and then I used a flat punch to just push down. That way I'm not doing it with my fingers. It's cold, that shit's painful, and it's highly effective. Ah, nice and easy. Okay, so I believe with those disconnected, oh, there's also a hose on the bottom here. I can actually undo that hose clamp by hand. That's kind of unusual. But there is a hose under here that is clamped on. Oh, and let's not forget this air hose on top. And now we should be free to remove the throttle body. Let's see if we can do it. So I'm going to start with the hardest one, which is tucked under here. I'm pretty sure that's it. I'm going to start them all by hand. And then okay, that was they're not torqued on super tight at all. So that's good. I mean, I do have a good amount of leverage with my nice ratchet here. So with it loose, I'm gonna sneak a magnet back there to grab the bolt and pull it out, and there it is. Okay, throttle body bolt. And the ones on top. Throttle body now is loose, visibly. I went ahead and threaded the nuts onto the bolts, and then I'm going to tape them together and label them. So tucked way down underneath this throttle body sensor, there is a coolant hose that runs in there that needs to be disconnected. Completely visible from here, but there it is. And you access the clamp from this side. Needle nose pliers that should get us right in there. Oh yeah, pull it right off. And now some hose pliers. Reach in there to twist it off. So a pretty good tool is a pick like so. There's a bunch of radiator pick tools out there. You just stick this pick underneath the hose and work it off. However, you need to exercise a lot of caution when doing this. You're really not trying to destroy your hose here, and you don't want to just be stabbing holes in it. So you want to make sure that you're always keeping it, you know, flush with the metal and you're not stabbing out. And now let's see if we can remove the throttle body, which I have never done. So actually, how do I guess I have to remove this cable probably. With removing this specific cable, we have to be careful not to throw it out of adjustment. So I'm only releasing this back nut, the one that's closest to you. So that shouldn't throw off the adjustment at all. There she is. Now I think we can remove the throttle body. Alright, so we've worked the throttle body off. However, there's two hoses underneath that are still holding on to it. One we have undone, but the other one, man, I'm really not sure how you're even supposed to reach that. There's the hose clamp tucked way under there. So I feel like I'm overthinking this, but this is kind of a huge pain in the butt. Alright, throttle body is now removed. One big unit. A huge benefit here is going to be able to clean the throttle body, because this is ridiculous. This is a huge amount of carbon buildup. I don't really think it's impeding anything, but I mean, that's nasty, and I'm sure the intake is just the same, so this will give us an opportunity to kind of clean that out. Maybe it'll run a little better. Probably won't make a big difference, but it'll feel better mentally. So when you're doing this job, you're definitely going to need a throttle body gasket, because there is no shot it's coming off in one piece. Oh, yep. Be careful where the little chunks of this gasket are going. Pretty clean. Alright, our next order of business is removing several different electrical connections from the AIC valve connector, EGR valve connector, VSV connector for evap, EGR gas temperature sensor connector, VSV connector, which is California only. So that's pretty much just all the plugs around here. Ow. I don't love doing it, but you can throw a little bit of penetrating oil into these connectors. Again, it's not really ideal, but it does help if it's really stuck. The reason I don't like using it on them is because there's these rubber insulators that will probably get destroyed by that oil. Okay, yeah, so I really just had to hammer that off. Sometimes I like to take something kind of metal and, you know, kind of whack some of these connectors and break up some of that dirt and try and free it. You can use, you know, little tools like this. Try not to pull from the wires, but a lot of these connectors are old and brittle. You want to be just, you know, you have to be stern and strong with it, but you also don't want to be rough. You can squeeze something in here to kind of, ow, stab yourself. but you can get a little bit of a pry started. Ooh, some of these take like a lot of finger and grip strength. That's kind of the hardest part. Ooh, okay. So that harness is pretty well undone. Ah, and here's another one. So this whole area is pretty intimidating. We've got kind of a lot going on. We have vacuum switching valves. Not 100% sure what this is. I'll look it up. But we got vacuum switching valves and a lot of harness and stuff going on. So keep in mind that like even when they're disconnected, a lot of wiring harnesses are going to keep their memory. So you can see it kind of lines up exactly where they're supposed to go. So although there are a lot of components, it's going to be pretty straightforward plugging them back in. Alright, so we removed a bunch of the electrical components, just unplugged them essentially. Now we need to remove this water hose. It's a little silly. This is one of the dumbest hoses on the car in my opinion because it doesn't really have any room to go anywhere, so it's kind of a pain in the ass to get off. Maybe we'll get lucky though. Alright, so it is like disconnected and broken. I might have just to pull that off when I remove the whole manifold. So there's coolant running through this valve as well as the throttle body. So those are two other places that coolant's running through, so I guess it's pretty necessary to drain the coolant anyway. We have this brake booster hose that needs to get removed. That's a bit tucked back there. Oh yeah, okay, this hose is... I don't think this hose is coming off without breaking. Oh boy. Oh dear. She's a cruncher. Yeah! Yeah, that is a brittle hose. Step number 7 says remove the PCV hose from the left-hand cylinder head cover. I don't think that's necessary at all. Alright, it's now telling me to remove one of the heater core pipes. I think it's referring to this one because it looks like it goes down into the water bridge, but this is really scary. I really don't want to do this. Although it doesn't really matter because it's going to this bypass valve, and the hoses that you need to really worry about are those two, because usually there's a metal coupler that sticks through the firewall that connects directly to the heater core. And if you break that, you have to do a heater core, which is usually a massive job. Alright, the next step is going to be undoing those bolts that hold that EGR pipe on. And again, I think one of these heater core hoses are down there. We might be able to disconnect it directly from the heater bypass valve. That might be easier than reaching all the way down there and fighting against the firewall the whole time. Yeah, baby! Alright, the next move is removing this data link connector bracket, which is just one nut, I believe. Which frees that up. Okay, interesting, I guess. So I think the next step is working around the intake manifold, this upper air chamber. It's time to remove it. Pretty exciting, and it's just a bunch of 12mm bolts and nuts all around the whole plenum. So I'm just gonna go around and remove them all. I'm gonna start this one with a wrench. No! It fell! And I can see it is laying there in the bottom of the V. So yeah, that nut's not going to hurt anything laying in the bottom there until I can get this off, so I'm not going to lose sleep over it. Okay, so the bolts that bolt the intake chamber on are also some of the same bolts that hold on the brackets. So that's probably why it doesn't have you remove any. Now, I'm going to highly suggest that you get a magnet for this job. That way, for some of these nuts, you can just reach in with the magnet and grab the nut instead of relying on your fingers, which might fumble the bag. Jesus, especially for some of these bolts. Some of these are pretty tucked in there. So it seems pretty loose, although I didn't remove as many bolts as it said. It said 8 nuts and 4 bolts. I got 2 bolts and 6 nuts. And it's acting like it's completely unbolted. I guess let's see if we can pull it off. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty ready. So, this part you want to do just slowly and carefully. Just make sure that everything's out of the way. You're not snagging on anything. Do it slowly to make sure you're not knocking chunks of stuff into the engine. Okay, still caught on here, but we knew that. Let's see what we're caught on over here. Okay, that doesn't help. All these brackets. Okay, the only thing holding it on now is that hose. Ah. Oh wait, we might have one more. Oh, it's tangled here. Oh, that's way heavier than I thought it would be. Jesus. We took one of the biggest, scariest looking pieces of the engine off, and here we are, baby. Getting kind of excited. Again, I only took off 2 bolts and 6 nuts. I have no idea why the manual was wrong about that. I also did not have to remove the heater core just to remove this component, so I don't really know exactly why it said that. Now this is scary. All these harnesses are going to be really brittle. Don't forget there's a gasket that goes to the EGR pipe there. There's these plenum gaskets on all 4 of these. Wow, it is so oily in here, man. So I'm just going to go ahead and take those all off. That all of this is open, we want to be very careful about dropping anything, and we want to be very careful about debris falling into the intake manifold. So I put some paper towels over those intake plenum runners, and I am just going to leave it here. I'm going to call it for today. I don't want to remove the fuel lines just yet because it's getting late and it's gonna stink up the garage, and I'm not gonna be able to work on it until Sunday. I'm gonna wait, and yeah, we'll leave it right here. But pretty good progress for today.